Hey, good morning. It's 7:05 a.m. It is May 2nd. It is a beautiful, I believe it's a Friday morning. Oh my goodness, this week is just flying by. Yes, it is a Friday morning, and it's so gorgeous outside. I'm sitting in bed and I'm looking out the window, and it's just like the sun's like beaming in. And I have like, what do you call it? Um, Sun catchers hanging in my window because I have come to realize that sometimes you have to improvise. Unfortunately, I was not able to be financially stable throughout my life, and I always loved stained glass windows, and I'm not able to afford a house with stained glass windows. So this is a wonderful, what do you call it, uh, substitution. Okay, it's a nice substitution, and some sun catchers can be made in a way to where like you have a lot of different colors on them. But this one that I'm looking at, or that's in my window right now, this is more like a plain type of little crystal chunk. And then when the light hits it, of course, it puts a pretty little rainbow pattern on my window and in my walls and stuff. It's very beautiful. Anyway, so I was thinking this morning, as usual, because I'm always thinking, right? I was thinking about the video that I posted last night. And this morning I am waking up with the intention of doing recording for my moral reset. And I've written out all of the scripts, and I've been very very focused on different topics, and sometimes the topics just kind of bubble and come up to the surface of my mind, like, okay, well, maybe you need to bring this up because this is something that occurs, quite frequently among people. Bring this issue up, because I want to make it as thorough as I possibly can, because some people don't fully understand. As is, a good example of that is me making like 1,600 videos, and people were still progressing in the hate campaign when they could have stopped and listened and reasoned and came to the understanding that, hey, we need to stop this foolishness. Okay, so I feel as though people really do need to understand and learn and slow down and internalize certain things so that they can analyze the information and make better decisions. Okay. And, I want to be as thorough as I possibly can. Now, I had mentioned that I have been using Grammarly because, for my newsletters, just like the last newsletter that I created, that was like the first time I used Grammarly to write my newsletter, because before that all my other newsletters were just written directly, I would be just using regular spell check. Okay. And I do believe that punctuation, I believe in punctuation, and I know that the school standards seem very laxed about certain things that they have decided to do away with or modify or think that it was not important. I also understand that because we do live in a computerized world where we take advantage of things like spell check, AI, and stuff like that. I sometimes question whether that's good for society, or is it bad for society, or is it just going to add to people not really wanting to delve into things on their own. You know what I mean? But anyway, yeah, I mean, I think about all of these different trends or things that come into, I guess, mainstream society to where we incorporate them into our daily lives and stuff like that. So anyway, I wanted to come on here and talk about some of the things that I was thinking about this morning. And one of the things I wanted to mention, because I was thinking about that commercial, that 80s commercial that I had posted in the description box on last night's video, right? Now I know that my form of entertainment seems strange to people, but some things are put together to where you can't help but cringe, like that is so corny or whatever, right? But certain songs or jingles will come into my mind because I believe it comes in the form of a spiritual message. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying, okay, that video about the Mormons talking about lying and then you have to create another and then you have to. I'm going to tell you what, growing up, I was a young kid, and I would cover up things that I would do. Like if I was responsible for dropping something or breaking something, there were times where I was afraid of the consequences. I was terrified of the consequences. It's not because I enjoyed lying, okay? I was afraid of the consequences because I will tell you, my parents were not the best when it came to discipline. Okay, to me, well, when you think about the definition of discipline, it is actually laying out a foundation, teaching, guiding people, you know, um, explaining things, thoroughly to where, people have a good idea on how or what road to go through. Their view of discipline sometimes was more like, okay, let me, spank you, or yeah, usually it was spanking. Okay, we got spanked a lot, and that's more of a punishment, and oftentimes people would I would walk away, and I remember my brother would get beat a lot of times, right? And he would still kind of do the same offense over and over again. It might be a different thing that he messed up on, but it was basically the same sort of issues. It was like nobody learned from their form of discipline, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't discipline, it was just, let me hit you after you do something wrong, okay? And this is one of the reasons why when I was growing up, I didn't have a good understanding like some kids did when it came to how they were able to save for their own bicycles and stuff like that, because my parents did not know how to discipline, train, teach, they were at some things. Like, for example, my parents raised me on the law. Like, you can't do this because of the law. But as far as like taking time to like show us, certain life skills, a lot of those things I had to learn on my own. It just, because my parents didn't know. And a lot of times when people grew up poor, like my parents grew up poor, right? They didn't really have any money to manage in the first place, right? They didn't have any money to manage in the first place. So when they do get money, my dad would pay his bills and stuff. I would say that my father was not frivolous with his money. But, I was somebody who was just more like, I didn't have any of those sort of responsibilities when I was a kid. It's like my parents paid for everything, and if I wanted something, I would either get it my allowance money, all right, and I mentioned, I would get allowance until I was like into my 20s. You know what I mean? Does that sound spoiled to some people? Some people think that's spoiled. Okay, in some ways, I think it kind of was, in a way, because it didn't give me the ability to understand things that I felt as though were important, okay? But that is going back to now, okay? Why was I getting on this subject? Because, I think there's a lot of times people do not understand, or they confuse one definition for another. You know what I mean? I would say when it comes to the issue of Mormons, you know, intervening in my life in the way that they did. I mean, I'm shocked and I'm disturbed, and I do understand how this sort of infiltration occurs, okay? I am over the age of 18, and, maybe some people don't, I feel as though, like when I was working, like my last job, I think it was Jackie's Place. Was that my last job? No, that was not my last job. The last job, I was over at Rex and Bird's place. See how I'm starting? It's just too many jobs, right? When I was at BT Trucking, that's the name of the company, right? When I was at BT Trucking, I was making a decent wage, and I was always paying my bills, and I was on top of everything, okay? The thing is like when you're dealing with somebody who, like myself, a minority, either whether it's because I'm a woman, whether it's because I'm a black woman, whether it's because I don't go to the Mormon church or whatever, they look for any excuses to, you know, uh, try to affect and take away something like your employment, okay? Or base your employment off of, stupid, frivolous things. Now, I had mentioned how angry I was about, if when I have money, I'm going to pay my bills, okay? But if I don't, I'm going to be very reserved, okay? And pretty much the only thing I spend money on is food. And, and I know that people were complaining about me, smoking weed. I will tell you, when it comes to, me smoking weed, I am not somebody who just smokes weed just to be smoking weed, okay? But, like, when I was younger, I would smoke weed because, I was a straight out stoner back then. But, it's more something for me to relax with. And maybe Mormons, at this point, okay? It's more like for relaxing, calming down, sleeping, whatever. And maybe Mormons, like, the Mormons had issues with caffeine many years ago. I don't know if they are now incorporating caffeine into their life or not, okay? But it's always a matter of personal choice, okay? And that is my choice. That's my right, okay? That's one of the reasons why things like marijuana and things like caffeine, okay, they're available to the public if people choose to want them, and it's their right to purchase those things. If it's my choice to, go to Trader Joe's and switch things up, because a lot of times, I'll just go to Walmart because it's convenient, okay? But Trader Joe's allows me to get onto the other side of town, okay? Whereas I'm usually stuck here, and it's nice to get away and just go to Trader Joe's. And Trader Joe's is not, to me, I don't think Trader Joe's is ritzy. One of the things Trader Joe's is known for me, is their prices, their reasonable prices. What it is that, I feel offended that people would actually monitor the things that people buy. And I know that this is another part of the process of these programs, these covert programs. When it comes to what I spend my money on, that's my choice. And it's just like it's everyone's choice what they choose to, like, some people, which I think is great, okay, some people stockpile. You know what I mean? Like they're constantly preparing for like earthquakes, they're preparing for disasters, and I honestly admire those people. And there's been times in the past where I've kind of started like that, like, okay, I'm gonna put these canned goods away. I remember purchasing a regular radio, that would require batteries, in case of a disaster. I've done these little things, okay, and I still have some stuff, okay, but some people get really deep into that sort of stuff, okay, and that's what they choose to do. But it's their option and their right to do that. If you want to stockpile and prepare for like some sort of disaster, they should. And personally, I truly do encourage that. But some people do that and some people don't. You know what I mean? It's like, these people were coming into my life telling me how to prioritize my life. See, one of the things that gives us joy in life is to make those decisions. That's our right. Does a person want to spend some of their weekly leftover wages on stockpiling, for some sort of unforeseen disaster? Or do they want to keep it in the bank? Or do they want to go ahead and take an extra $20 and invest in their garden so that they can find their home more pleasurable? That is their choice. You see what I'm saying? And because Mormons may choose to live, very scarcely, and there are some people who are like that, like, they don't want to, buy anything extravagant, and what's extravagant to one person is like, absolutely nothing to another. Because I will tell you, I had mentioned last night, and I think I mentioned this before, and it's so true that it does bear repeating, right? I don't own anything of value. I don't own anything of, like I said, if something happened to me and I needed quick cash, I could not sit here and like try to negotiate a price for my, particle board stand. Does anybody want my desk that's made of particle board? How about my side drawers that are made of plastic? You know what I mean? That I picked up at Walmart on sale. I mean, to me, it's like, what it was is this was highly encouraged, I believe, by the Nazi beliefs, to where they didn't want you to have absolutely anything, especially, and why that bothers me, because right now I'm sitting here, I'm not working, and I'm still affected by being mistreated the way that I was. I'm still angry and terrified and tormented mentally that somebody would actually launch this sort of attack on me. And the fact that this sort of stuff is becoming so commonplace that now we worked into this whole issue with the DEI and the whole, what do you call it? the boycotting. Now, I have not been paying attention to the boycotting issue, I would say, in the last few weeks. So I don't even know if that's a big thing right now. And it could be, I don't know, okay? Right now, I feel as though everything is becoming extremely overwhelming to me because of my disgust in the low standards and behaviors of people. You know what I mean? What I wanted to talk today about is, a little bit more about infiltration. And I wanted to talk about that because, I had mentioned how infiltration works. It works where, you have these people posing as your friends, or people who want to gather information about you. And, chances are, when I was working at Murray Family Farms, even though Steve Murray was in collaboration with Mormons and he was in collaboration with, um, like Rex Laverne and I can't think of the other name, whatever. But the Moomaw family, perhaps maybe the generation. I don't know. I don't know how much of a role the Moomaw family plays in my life as Maria Gordon. I just know that there had some sort of connection with me as CV. But anyway, I know that they work in a covert manner. Okay, this is part of the how the operation works. Okay, it works in a way where they might approach a member of like local government, like for example Karen Go, right? And or at the time it was Harvey Hall. Okay, and I know that Harvey Hall probably had questionable views and whatever. Okay, but he's rest his soul, whatever, he's gone. But anyway, what they'll do is they will, say, hey, we are concerned about this particular individual or whatever, and they'll start their propaganda, their campaign on trying to, have something against me. And they probably knew that I was associated with the Soul Tribe because of the whole, I know everybody knows your genealogy. They're so into that whole researching thing and whatever. Anyway, this is how it works, okay? And then they convince people that their religion is like, a legal issue. Like they have the right. They are so convinced themselves of this sort of toxic mind control. And they'll spread it around and they'll encourage other people. And then they incentivize the criminal activity. How do they do this? By giving people employment opportunities. Sometimes, like I mentioned, they'll give gift cards or something that they can give people so that they are willing to betray you. Okay, so this is where my Judas Iscariots come in. Okay, the Judas Iscariots, because when we think of, like the Bible, right? When Jesus was betrayed by Judas, and Judas, like, when Judas realized, okay, that it was not worth, betraying the Savior, right? He wanted to give it back, but it was too late. He wanted to give it back, but it was too late. It was too late. The damage was already done. And a lot like how the issue happened with Judas. Judas had the opportunity. The reason why it was unforgivable in the eyes of God, the reason why Judas had to destroy himself is because it was a well thought out plot, and he had the ability to change his way of thinking, but he went through with it anyway. The whole transaction of him accepting the silver, that was something that was going on. He could have stopped himself. He could have, said, I want to go through with this. I don't want to, but he went through with it, knowing good and well. And so this is why I relate that situation to what happened. And so yes, I do believe that the Bible is good because it talks about things that happened in the past that are very likely to continue to happen. Just like if you were somebody who is special and gifted, connected to the divine, okay, people aren't going to take to you right away. You know why? Because they don't know what purity is, even though they claim that their religions are based on that. Okay, now the reason why I had mentioned that Mormon commercial the night before is because I remember getting beat up by these kids in school, right? But I just thought, just like any other kid, they were just being bratty, but I also remember associating and even spending playtime with a Mormon girl. I'm not going to mention her name, okay? But her father did. He was a manager of a retail store, and they had quite a large family. All right. So anyway, the reason why I felt that I could be close to her when I was a kid at face value, like I didn't sit here and like tap in, meditate, try to figure out, her intentions, because I didn't think I was involved in anything that deep. I was in 7th grade. We were 7th grade kids, and we just hung out on the playground every once in a while, right? But I remember seeing that commercial, right, about the lying thing. And I already started developing my standards of what kind of friends I wanted when I was in school. And I knew I did not want to have to be around people who lied, who played games with me, pretended to be my friend, and then turned around and stabbed my back. I started developing certain wants and needs and expectations as to who I'm going to sit lunch with and this sort of thing. So, I remember seeing the commercial. This is one of the reasons why I remember it so well, because I kept thinking, well, you know what, at least Mormons don't lie. Okay, or at least, it's not that I didn't think it was possible that they couldn't lie or they could lie, but it was more like me thinking like, well, this is a standard that I expect her to uphold. You know what I mean? She's probably a good friend because she probably wouldn't lie, or she would try not to lie. Okay, because I that's the kind of friend I need. I need a good friend, right? And so even though I never wanted to be a Mormon myself, I felt like, well, I could open my heart and friendship to her because she would have standards, the kind of standards that I would be respectable. So I do believe that there were Mormons who were sincere when they made that commercial. Okay, like I said, not everybody who was associated with Mormonism was crooked like these people who did what they did. That's my point, okay? Because obviously that was a standard. But I am saying, okay, like, people can get big-headed. They can get out of control. It can get like the hall monitor episode to where they think that they have more rights than what they do, okay? So when it comes to things like, dual affiliations and how this sort of infiltration works, I'm going to give you a couple examples, okay? Like, for example, okay, the congregation within the Mormon Church, okay, and in the case where they were spreading and joining forces with other churches, if they do not like somebody, like maybe a church member or whatever, does not like a particular person, they could orchestrate meetings and transfer this information and spread it through their different congregations. Each person, of course, works, they have a job or whatever. Some people might work in the financial sector, right? And they're going around reporting, sensitive information that they have probably signed NDAs with their company that they will not disclose this information, but they are disclosing it to their church members, thinking that they are doing some sort of duty. Okay, thinking that, because, I've even heard people use terms like, soldiers for Christ, or, this kind of stuff, okay? When I will tell you, it is no one's business what people have in their what do you call it, their credit cards. This sort of stuff is a form of attack. Now, I'm going to tell you something. When I was working after I left BT Trucking, okay, they purposely destroyed my credit. They purposely did that, okay? I was making my payments on my credit card, and I noticed that my availabilities was going down. They did not want me to buy clothes, so they made it so that my account got closed at JCPenney's. Some people say, oh, that's insane, Marie, that's not true. Yes, it is true. How do they do this sort of terrorism? You know what they do? Through dual association. They have people working in certain companies. They have people working in certain positions, being able to have access to people's social security numbers and all this sort of private stuff. This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what gang stalking and human trafficking can evolve into, right? So it's more than just an issue of DEI when I think about the violations of Mormons coming in, or any sort of religion, with their, dual affiliations with other churches and stuff. If this was truly it's not, it's because Mormons view the material plane as the most important thing. This is one of the reasons why they attack people's finances. They go after people and their structures and stuff like this because they are demons. Period. They're demonically inspired. All right? And they abuse people in the manner that they do. And I will tell you, right now is the best time for employers to start re-educating. And I'm hoping that I'm putting this in the moral reset. Okay, because like I said, the idea of the moral reset is to go into every sector of society. That's law enforcement, that's human trafficking agencies, that's, child protective services, etc., etc., etc. Okay, because these people are violators. Okay, they are not upholding their contracts with their employer to keep this information private. And of course, there are companies that may be operating under the disguise of certain other companies so that they can continue doing this sort of underground operation. Like I had mentioned, the Department of Human Trafficking. I am not saying, I have no idea who runs the Department of Human Trafficking. Okay, I do not know if, some of these faith-based adoption agencies are actually doing things that are legitimate. You know what I mean? And I'm not just trying to point out faith-based things, but with the whole issue of cloning and all this other shit that goes on with the Mormon Church and stuff like that, my mind is very, very open to all of this. You know what I mean? And it's like, I am sitting here thinking, okay, where is this stuff hiding? How does this stuff happen? See, and this is one of the things I'm talking about, like when the panic and the fear that I started having when I realized they were messing with my credit. At this age, I don't need people messing with my credit. I don't need that. Okay? And then this is what upset me is I tried to get on my feet to save my credit score, to save my ability to survive by opening my Patreon and my Ko-fi account. And guess what? They decided to take that. These people are demonic. Now, maybe at one time, like I said, they were trying not to lie. They were trying to have some sort of good moral system and, put into place or whatever. But things can get out of control. And with this, what happened was, this is where we're at. You know what I mean? This is where we're at. People are, the whole boycotting of Mormon businesses, but it's not just the DEI. It's the infiltrations that's going on in companies, in agencies, in all of these, organizations. There's dual affiliations going on. And employers need to wake up to this, okay? And if they're not, then they're probably contributing to the problem. You know what I mean? I remember there was a company that said that they were a merchandising company. They would, go ahead and create and design, drinking cups and, novelty items and stuff like that. But what really they were doing, they were trafficking things like cocaine, okay? Same thing. How do we know that the Department of Human Trafficking is just using the Department of Human Trafficking to be cheeky? You know what I mean? But in fact, what they're actually doing is helping the trafficking problem. And, in a world of gaslighting, lying, the covert nature of just about every transaction that goes on, and it's become a con game, you know what I mean? To where, like, I can't trust or believe in anyone. You know what I mean? I can't take anything at face value like I used to a long time ago. Just because somebody says that they don't lie or they say they were affiliated with something. At this point in my life, that's the first thing that sets off alarms in my mind. When people try to convince me of how, good they are, then I'm like, oh shit, I'm starting to worry. You know what I mean? I'm starting to worry. But yeah, that's where it's hiding. You know what I mean? My credit got messed up, and I made an effort. So this was a deliberate takedown. It was an orchestrated takedown that was made by these groups. You know what I mean? And so my concern is anytime I deal with people on the phone, like I don't like communicating with people on the phone. I don't like calling customer service or anything because there's a chance that a Mormon was, instructed, or a Mormon offshoot, or, some weirdo that's sitting at this desk trying to play their game. So, employers right now need to be hyper vigilant about this sort of thing that's going on right now. Okay, because you have spies in your workplace. If you care about it, then that shows that you're willing to do something about it. If you're not, then you are definitely a part of the problem. You're operating as this sort of underground whatever, and this is really what it's coming down to. Like I said, how in the world would somebody even know that I had a JCPenney card? Because these people spy and they want to make decisions as to what you can and cannot have. That's bullshit. And it's nobody's business. When I signed my agreement with the JCPenney's credit card, that agreement was between me and JCPenney. Now, if JCPenney's is somehow, or I think that the bank that owns that, I think it's called Synchrony Bank or whatever, if they are somehow Mormons themselves, you know what I mean, and then making your information, public, or at least public enough to, and how they do these sort of things, it's important to understand how the underground syndicate works, and that's part of it. That's part of the operation. Okay, and I'm explaining this to people so they can keep their eyes open. In order to correct society to where, we have upstanding people, they need to live in an upstanding environment. These things have to be eradicated. And I'm telling people how to eradicate it. You know what I mean? And, like I said, one of the things I never want to do is I never want to target people. Because I know what it's like to be profiled or targeted, bringing up my marital status because I'm looking for a job. Talking about my hair. Okay, look, these things are nobody's business. They're nobody's business. If I'm coming to work, I'm coming to work to do my job. I am coming to do my job to process payables or do bookkeeping or whatever it is that I get paid for. It's an exchange of service. I provide a service to you by doing the work, and then you pay me. It's called compensation. It is not you slave out my life, you dictate what I do, you try to tell me what I wear, or that sort of stuff, what I'm supposed to buy. I mean, that has become an absolute nightmare. So is this sort of behavior that they wanted to carry into the New World Order? Because, see, some people do have the urge and need and drive to control. That's the only thing that they know how to do because of this belief. I believe it's, maybe demonic DNA. There are some people who are walking around with demonic DNA. I do believe this. People who really cannot do anything. They are here for the sole purpose of control. Some sort of weird dark energy that they have, and this is what they're here for. Okay? And there are certain people, and I'm not saying all white people are like this, okay? But obviously, these particular groups that really wanted to drive this home unnecessarily and dig further into people and infiltrate in the manner that they did, there's something wrong with you. Okay? To me, anything that relates to mind control, trying to, study people's habits, trying to get that deep inside somebody's psyche, there is no need for that other than something demonic. Anyway. So yeah, I am talking about that, and I'm talking about the violation of workplace laws, as well as people, the fact that there could be spies within employment organizations, disclosing your customers' personal information and sharing that information with other people who are positioned in. I'm telling you how operations work. You know what I mean? How these covert things work and how they're being encouraged, just like how Rex Laverne was able to do that, you know what I mean, to brainwash people. And maybe he changed some people who at one point were trying to follow the little moral system that the LDS church was trying to talk about or show or encourage, but they went the wrong way because of their ego, because it's more than lying. Okay, these people, and like in the commercial, like you tell a lie, you have to tell another. Not to be cheesy or anything, but It is true, okay? Because then they got to cover up, and then they got to do the covert nature thing, and then they're going to try to gaslight you. They want to dump all of that on you. They want to make it seem like you're crazy. You're not crazy. You're not crazy, okay? There is seriously an issue with infiltration. So companies that really want to get on board and correct this problem, they need to get together with their employees and go over their company habits and go over, workplace laws, making sure that people are not doing things that are compromising your reputation. That's exactly what it is, a compromising of your reputation. Because when we think about, people that fall out of line in certain companies, like there's been companies where, like, maybe okay, for example, okay, I'm just making this one up on the top of my head. Like if somebody they actually did show somebody peeing in some coffee, but they didn't say what company it was. Okay, so an employee pees in coffee, right? And they get filmed, and they figure out the name of the company that, like, let's just say, for example, it's a company called I don't know, Sky Goat. I can't think of anything else, right? Sky Goat. Okay. So somebody pees in the coffee at Sky Goat, right? And then all of a sudden, people are talking crap about Sky Goat. Okay. It's not yes, the employee who did it is bad, right? But people will also take it against the company. They will hold it against the company, and they will also associate the Sky Goat company with being pissed in the coffee. They'll blame Sky Goat for not being, aware of what their employees are doing. They're holding these people accountable. They're disgusted by what this person did. So in this case, yeah, it's like, these people are coming into your company and doing things that are violating your company. And not only that, they are putting people at risk. Now, I don't know. I remember hearing about some sort of bank issue where people were having some sort of issue with their funds a couple days ago. I don't know if that's a Mormon or that's some sort of orchestration by this underground crime syndicate. What wouldn't you do if you are willing to torment a person? If you are willing to tell and dictate what a person does, trying to, make them live or force their religion onto them, you're going to exploit somebody whose family was put together by a Nazi operation, and then still want to, abuse someone in the manner that you did happily, just with full joy and enthusiasm into tormenting a person who was completely innocent. What wouldn't you do? Okay, when I think of Mormonism, I cannot think of anything else but demonic. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Fear, lots of fear. You know what I mean? And this is one of the reasons why it's like, it's important for me to set my standards for my environment. So people have the right to say, you know what, I need to set my standards. I have standards. Like, I don't want just anybody, coming into my house. I don't want anybody just thinking that they're my friend. I don't like anybody thinking that they can just touch me. Like when Rex Laverne touched me, that made me sick to my stomach. You know why? Because I knew that this man was an evil being. And how dare you touch me? And the reason why I kind of felt like, I kind of felt the residue or whatever. I'm just like feeling the residuals of his evil. Like I just couldn't take it. Don't touch me. If you're not someone who's decent to me, just don't touch me. Okay? I have the right to have boundaries. You know what I mean? I have the right to have standards of what kind of people I want to call my friends. I'm going to have acquaintances. Okay? Like people I know their name. I might know their kid's name. I say hi to them and whatever. Okay? But who I choose to call my friend, yes, you have the right to choose and set your standards as to who you want to call a friend and what kind of friend. And I will tell you, the kind of friend I have would have never allowed me to go through something like this. They would not. And when your own family is so brainwashed into being a part of something that makes absolutely no sense. You know what I mean? This is when, you realize you're dealing with something very, very deep and it's serious mind control. Also, when I'm talking about other, I'm going into all the sectors of society, these organizations that are saying that they're helpful to people, like the Department of Human Trafficking. And like I said, I'm not picking on them specifically on purpose. I'm saying this because I need to know what these organizations really do. You know what I mean? And I'm going to tell you, it's no way in the world that I'm going to get information from every single last organization. But I am going to put it into the morals reset and kind of phrase it in a way where it needs to be understood that because we do not have the true or the guarantee of any sort of organization, we can't guarantee their safety. That we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves, and we need to be aware of what's going on around us. Okay, and if law enforcement, like I said, law enforcement obviously can be controlled and manipulated by these people through underground means. You know, do I believe that there were police officers that were highly influenced and encouraged by either the Mormons themselves or Nazis? Yes, absolutely. You know what I mean? Although I do believe that I get along with the BTPD right now, okay? Because I seriously, because I have never done, I honestly do think the law enforcement is cool with me now, okay? But still, at one time, do I think that this sort of infiltration or this sort of encouragement was going on? Yes. Yes. Okay? And these things need to not be hiding into society. They cannot have dual affiliations. You know, people have to, you know, weed those out without singling out, like, for example, Mormon people. You know what I mean? Because and I'm being this way because, number one, it's fair, it's the law, and it's not right for people to target people. You know, if a person is able-bodied and they're qualified for a job, well, you know, I'm not, even though they did this to me, even though they did what they did to me, okay, I will never resort to being that evil. But what is already in place is people need to uphold their confidentiality contracts. If I am sure, like companies that keep people's information, their private information, I am sure that that is in their company handbook, or at least, you know, it should be encouraged, okay? People need to be reminded of that right now. They need to be reminded of that right now. You know what I mean? Churches who really do not want to be affiliated with the bad reputation that the Mormon Church has, they need to educate their congregations on how they're supposed to behave. If they want to get more converts, like I said, how do you win people over? You win people over by your behavior. That's what you do. You know what I mean? People are like, wow, she lives a cool life, or he lives a cool life, or their family looks like, I wish I had a family like that. How do I get that? By, you know, emulating us because we have the best path in life, right? This is how you do that. You know, you don't force people into it. You know, the Mormon Church is highly resented, not just by me, by a lot of other people. Okay, it has ruined a lot of people in more ways than one. You know, it's the ties and the unnecessary binding and the control, the excess control that they demand from people that causes so much mental problems. I'm looking forward to sharing that information about the dual affiliations and talking about each sector. Me addressing, you know, law enforcement, me addressing, you know, organizations like the Department of Human Trafficking. You know, are these organizations faith-based? And don't get me wrong, it could happen in like if there was a county or state adoption agency, there could be Mormons or religious freaks or whatever who work for those organizations, okay? But we also have to consider organizations that are faith-based who feel strong about their agenda. They should be monitored too. Now, I do believe those organizations are usually considered private. I have not studied the implications on like how government could access their information. I don't know that. Okay, I'm hoping to find information on that. Okay, but what needs to be done is people need to be warned about, you know, instead of being careless with things like unwanted pregnancies and stuff like that, people need to be more responsible about, you know, having sex possibly before marriage, or, you know, being able to get rid of children whenever you want to. People need to be aware of what the consequences, and letting people know, hey, you can't necessarily trust a foster company agency. Okay, because people need to understand that people can't just create life and then throw it away, because we don't know if these agencies are legit or not. We don't know if these people are going to, send these kids off to good homes, or, it could be some sort of underground torture, what do you call it, program, whether that be through sex prostitution or something along those lines. We have absolutely no idea until somebody stands up and holds these people accountable. Does that sound deep? Well, that's the only way we're going to attack human trafficking. You know, I did the intuitive message that a lot of Mormon companies are going broke, and I think it's a lot of the DEI and the protesting. And like I said, I never lifted a finger. I never organized or structured this, and I do want to say, for the people who are standing up and making that decision, all I'm going to say is, evil has to come down. It can't continue to be like this. You know what I mean? People are very depressed. They're very unhappy with the work life, and having their information being disclosed, and people being judged on things that really should remain private. You know what I mean? It should be. I feel violated. I feel very violated that, I could sit here and, like, I can't feel safe, going to the store. I can't feel safe, It's like, that's none of your business. It's none of your business. My marital status is none of your business. You know what I mean? I don't need to be, put on display and be made a mockery of, because, these people decided to take advantage of my career. That's mine. My skills, my whatever. And the thing is because they were doing this bloodline targeting, they needed to feel superior, so they had to suppress me. That's what it was. You know what I mean? It gets really tiring. But I am fully aware, though, that there is no fame and fortune without some sort of slavery. And I'm fully aware of that. Okay, I really do get it. I understand that the worldly pursuits, it really doesn't seem like it's worth, putting yourself out for. I understand that I do have a better understanding of what is attainable on this earth, and this is one of the reasons why it's so important for people to develop themselves in their creativity and their hobbies, instead of, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm always going to do a good job wherever I work, because, I enjoy working. I do, and I keep myself encouraged, okay? I enjoy working and challenging myself, okay? But, I understand that in my life, in the past, I too wanted to be comfortable. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with people who want to be comfortable. Being comfortable where, like, I never had to worry about, being in the situation that I'm in. You know what I mean? I never had to worry about moments of unemployment. I wanted consistency. I wanted stability. And I do understand that that was not all within my control. It's not that I didn't have the ability or the endurance to do it. It's just that there were things that were in place in underground crime syndicates that prevented me from having a decent quality life. Okay, and all I can do is control what I can control. And what these people were trying to do was trying to prevent me from even controlling the things that I had control over, which is, to me, is outright evil. So yeah, I know I do get the intuitive message that a lot of people have seen my videos talking about, the New World Order, the structure of it, how, Charles Taze Russell saw it, which is like the Jehovah's Witness Association, believing that the earth is going to be the new system. And then we have the Mormons who, to me, it seems like they do favor, things like transhumanism. It comes to my mind with the idea of robots and, AI controlling everything, and, the removal of, it just seems very strange to me. Okay. What I do believe, though, is that pet society can benefit from adapting better morals and unplugging and unclogging the uh, a major a major issue that affects not just the United States but just worldwide. I mean, when you think of human trafficking, it's huge. The numbers are shocking. Okay, we live in a world that is extremely immoral, and that shows it. And so that needs to be untangled. And then also, better opportunities need to be available if the New World Order is supposed to be uh, continue, the monetary system. I'm going to write it all out, right? So, and then I'm going to post it on Facebook, and then let other people, decide is what I'm going to do. I would think that it's interesting, and hopefully people will participate in my survey and stop playing their stupid games like, Rex Laverne, whatever. I am interested in knowing what people think of which new world order seems more appealing to them. It doesn't seem more appealing to live in a system where, I would think, if we all had land, then that would be government issued, as well as the reliance upon food would also be issued, unless, of course, each person has their own land and they're growing it on their own property. And then also, what does it sound like if it was where it was like, we had to work? Um, and do you foresee that because of the monetary system continually being in existence, do you see where people could get the point of where they would become dissatisfied and want more? And see, I'm already trained to know not to want more. As a matter of fact, I'm at a point in my life right now where I'm like, okay, all I really want is stability. I would be content living in a tiny home. I would be completely content living in a tiny home. The only thing is, I know I could not live in a tiny home like for 30 years without changing it in some way. Like, I would want to paint the walls, rearrange the furniture. This is one way that you continually keep things fresh, okay? But I'm not the kind of person who's always, having to keep up with the Joneses. If the Joneses adds on another, story to their house, do I need to do the same thing? Do I have to? I'm not like that, okay? I have learned to just be very content with what I have. You know what I mean? And, the very fact that Mormons wanted to pry the little things that I do have is just so, to me, like, outright demonic. It freaks me out. It freaks me out because it's like they want you to feel the full impact of the suffering that they cause you. They do not want you to have any comfort at all. They want you to hurt, all because you do not want their religion. Not because I've never offended God, okay? And neither are the other people who are attacked by Mormons or affected by their ideology, okay? There is nothing wrong with anything that I do. If it was, I do not believe that I would be in the position that I'm in right now, meaning a person who has full capabilities of drawing in pure, unadulterated wisdom. Okay, and that's really what it boils down to. So anyway, I think it's interesting because I think I'm the kind of person that could live contently in peace. Also, when it comes to immortality, you know, we're talking about clones. So the clone bodies would possibly either have to be improved to where they are going to last for eternity, or once again, person reaches a certain age, they would have to kind of go through a cycle of retaining or obtaining another body again, right? I would think that that's how it would have to work if people want to be continually, because the Jehovah's Witnesses visualized it as having eternal youth. Like, you get to be like 30 years old and you continue that. You'd look pretty much that age for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? And that's no older than that because, that's what people think is ideal, okay? And the only way you can do that is if a clone body is made to be immortal, right? Or you would have to constantly change that out, All very interesting. All very interesting. You know what I mean? And it has crossed my mind when I think of, the idea of the New World Order, you know, that is this something that was inspired by a trickster god? You know what I mean? But I will cover more into that in my next videos. But it's on the back burner because I've got other things I need to do. Like today, I need to work on narrating my moral reset. But it's definitely something that I plan on presenting in the future because I have to fill my life with the things that are important to me. This is what keeps us going. If I will tell you, nothing externally keeps me going. It just gets to the point where, you know, it's too much pain on the outside world. There's too much corruption. There is nothing that I find like that keeps me wanting to be an active participant in the abusive nature of society. You know what I mean? So I understand. I do what I have to. Like I when I get up and go somewhere, like went to the library yesterday. Yeah, I coordinated my outfit yesterday. You know why? Because that's something I can do. Because I felt like I wanted to. Because I felt like I wanted to feel happy. So I lifted my mood. And then I went to the library. And then when I came home, I think I made a video or something like that. And then, yeah, and that's important to me. You know why? Because it's my only pleasure in life. Okay? I cannot find pleasure in anything other than the things that I do. And the why is that? Because we have been under a demonic influence for a very long time. And if we can change that, maybe I can enjoy the outside world again. Maybe everyone can enjoy the outside world again without living in fear. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up this video, and I will be back with another one sometime later. Take care. Bye-bye.